All right, action. Okay, so believe it or not, we're starting our last demo. Hard to believe. Semester's over. As we said way at the beginning of the semester, the Teapot is the culmination of everything you've been doing all semester. We've pulled handles right from the beginning, making mugs and pitchers, right? We've just finished lidded jars. What we're going to learn today is how to throw a spout, a very narrow thrown piece, and then we will be putting together those four components: a lidded jar, a handle, and a spout. But we have to put them together in a certain way so that the teapot functions. As we know, the potter is always balancing form and function. What looks right, but yet also has to function. Okay, so, and there are certain lids I think that function better. You can see I'm attracted to the recessed knob lid for a teapot lid. A flange lid that we talked about also works well, especially with a long flange, so that when you tip the teapot over, the lid doesn't go falling into your grandmother's teacup and splash and whatnot. So long flange holds it in place as you tip it. I still always like to put my hand on the knob a little bit, no matter what kind of lid I have. I like to put my hand there. But my former student, Matt Heilich, loves the rose jar lid for his teapot. So it's almost like the opposite flange, as we know now from doing lids. It's like the flange is on the jar going into the lid, whereas the flange lid, the flange goes into the jar. So it's almost like the opposite. He loves this kind of lid. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to do this a little backwards. I'm going to pull a handle, and then I'm going to show you how to throw a spout, because when we attach, well, you know how when we attach a handle, it's not leather hard, right? It's just what we call set up, right? So the spout too will just be set up, because we are going to blend it into the body of the teapot, just like we blend the handle into the body of the teapot. So they're not, neither are leather hard, they're just set up. But the lid in the jar, of course, will be set up. So I'll just put a little newspaper down as I pull a handle. So, as always, you would want your jar in front of you as you pull a handle, or whatever it is you're pulling a handle for. Now, as you can see by these examples, you can put a top handle on or a side handle. Of course, the assignment will be to do one of each. One will have a top handle, one will have a side handle. So you have to think about that ahead of time, because do you have room on the top, the shoulder area, to attach the handle? You have to accommodate that. So for this one, I was planning on putting a top handle on, although now that I look at it, you can see how clunky it is, how wide the bottom is, so I am going to trim it. I don't usually do that to save time, but when I don't trim, then you guys don't trim. And wait till you see how much better the form is going to look when it does have a foot. As you can see how wide it is. Okay, so maybe we haven't pulled handles in a while, after bowls and jars. So as always, run your knuckles down it to give it a little dimension. Hold it up against the form to make sure it's wide enough. Not too thick, not too thin. And as always, pull more than one. With teapots, I'm going to throw at least a couple of lids, at least a couple of spouts, and at least a couple of handles. You don't want to go through all this work and, you know, what if you drop the lid on the floor and you've got this teapot ready to go? You know, you don't want to put yourself in that position. So several lids, several spouts, and then plus some look better than others. So you've got the aesthetic aspect. Does one spout or one lid look better with the form than the other? Or is there a technical problem? So make several. And by assembling one all together, your second one will go a lot easier. Okay, so again, check width, thickness. Okay. Lay them out to set up. Then we will go throw a spout. All right, that should do it. Also have your teapot nearby when you're throwing a spout. So we'll bring this back over to the wheel. Okay, so as we throw spouts today, the only other, well, no, I shouldn't say the only other, but what we're throwing could also become, the way I'm throwing it and showing you, this is broken, but it could become also the manner in which you would throw a stem on a goblet. Oh, sorry.
In that way. Yes. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay, down low.
You're out of frame.
Down low.
You're out of frame when you do that.
So the stem on a goblet, which, if you were interested, you throw the cup separately and the stem separately, and then you slip and score them together. Bless you. Bless you. The other form that this method would apply to is the neck on a bottle. Okay, so put that here. Okay. So as we were throwing lids off the hump, we throw the spouts off the hump. So if you were making a teapot, wedge up a lot of clay, cut a portion off of it to throw your teapot, use the other portion to throw your lids and your spouts, and that way all of the clay comes from the same type, or all of the components come from the same type of clay. Does that make sense? Okay, then you're pulling your hand. Now, spouts are tricky because they are, you know, you're going to form them so narrow. The tube is going to be so narrow. So I would suggest using your handle clay over there, which looks like not too many people are using because the lid is, it's still like jam tight. Is that it, Taylor, right by you? Is it getting stiff?
Yeah, like really stiff.
Maybe we could dig out the top layer. If the lid is not on there tight, it's going to dry out, but if that's old clay at this point, I would suggest, okay, so I just contradicted myself, that wouldn't be the same clay you're throwing your body and lid, but that might be all right. At least if you throw the teapot body and lid from the same clay, I would use that nice aged clay to throw your spouts and pull your handles, because you do need it aged. It's tricky. If I'm not having a good day today, this demo will not be pretty. We'll find out soon. Okay, so as with throwing off the hump, you're just centering a small section. The main difference about the spouts is they don't have a bottom. You're not going to be throwing a bottom on these. They're going to be hollow. So you don't have to worry about a floor and that old compressing thing that we do, right? I'm looking around. I have a bucket of sample spouts somewhere around here. I should have gotten them out. think they're over there. Alright, so I'm just gently centering by, you probably can't, can you see what I'm doing? I'm coning up, then I'm pushing down just a small section. Okay? Good. Sounds like this is going to let go. Alright. So I'm opening it up. This is the one time you'll see potters open with their thumbs. I usually don't, except when I'm throwing off the hump. Open with my thumb, and I'm not worried about a bottom. We're not going to have a bottom. It's sort of going to be like this, right? So, no bottom. All right. Start pulling up the walls immediately, since we're not worried about a bottom. But what we're going to be doing with spouts is we're going to collar in after every pull. We're going to pull up and we're going to collar in. Obviously we're throwing a very narrow tube. And we want this as thin as you can possibly get it. Don't collar it in so much at the beginning that you can't get your hands down in there, but every time you collar in, the walls thicken up. So you collar in, pull up, collar in, pull up. Obviously, the shape and size of your teapot is going to determine the shape and size of your spout, which we will discuss when we're putting it together. But this is why I have my teapot next to me. There are rules for attaching spouts, the height of the lip of the spout, etc. So I'm trying to get this really thin. As you can see, they're going to be very narrow. Well, I have some over here that I threw yesterday. Normally I don't throw them ahead of time because you usually throw them right when you pull the handle. I don't know, I just thought I better have some in reserve just in case. I was anticipating a bad throwing day. So, just to give you a sense, the spout's going to get cut to fit the body of the teapot. Just one basic rule, it's getting heavy, is the lip of the spout should be equal to or higher than the lip of the vessel. Why do you think that is so? So what?
You don't spill, like it doesn't come through.
Right. If you have your teapot's a certain height, you're going to fill water to the height of that teapot. If your spout's way down here, then you can only fill the water to that level, or it will spill out, as Anna said. So equal to the lip or higher is the general rule. So you have to figure that out, accommodate for placing it technically, physically, aesthetically, and then is there room for your handle? Are you doing a top handle? Are you doing a side handle? There's lots of things to consider. So, yeah, see, these are getting stiff. I threw them yesterday, and so they're getting pretty stiff already. But they were in reserve in case I needed them. Might give them a little spritz, put them back under plastic. Now that you have a sense of what we're doing here. So they're hollow, or no bottoms. But anyway, so the opening is so narrow. I think that's where I was going with that. The opening's so narrow, and don't forget, there's going to be a layer of glaze on the inside as well. So you don't want to completely close it off, but you want it as thin as possible. So there's lots of steps along the way. Again, you can go to the library, read the section in your book on teapots because Robin Hopper is a master technician. Now the Japanese throw with throwing sticks. They throw a lot of bottles with narrow necks, and when you can't get your fingers down there anymore, they'll have a stick. You know, a nice wooden stick, not a lovely plastic stick like we have here. Variety of things that when they can't get their fingers down anymore, they can use a stick to throw against. I can still get down here a little bit. You can't get over anxious and collar it in too much before you thin it. It's sort of fun to collar in and then you go, oops, I didn't get the clay out. But every time you collar in, it does thicken up. So you really do want aged clay for this. I would definitely, maybe Anthony can help us dig out that top layer of that clay. Use that for your spout throwing. Paper thin if you can. Then you may be down to one finger. And then when you can't get a finger down there at all, that's when you can use a throwing stick, which takes practice like anything else. But you can always get a pinky down there. But when you're throwing this narrow, this thin, you want your clay to be really plastic. Some forms are going to demand a very tall spout with a long neck like this. And as you can see, some of the teapots on the table have a very tiny spout. So again, you definitely want to throw more than one. More than one lid, more than one spout, more than one handle. Keep your hands really steady as you collar it in. Don't get it so narrow, again, that you're not going to be able to pour any liquid out of it. You can use your rubber rib if you have too many finger ridges on it, and if you don't want them on there, you can use your rubber rib to get rid of them. It's your best tool for putting the marks to rest, getting rid of the scratch marks from the grog. Okay. I think I left my little cork over there. Megan, my little cutting cork, is it still there? Thank you. You really, really, really need a very fine needle to trim a very fine lip like this. See, the problem is they sort of come out of the corks. Maybe we ought to put some glue in there. Make a bunch of these and put some glue in. Even that one needle over there, the one needle that's left in the green foam there, I found yesterday was really thick. So I got up and I put a finer sewing needle in this cork. You know, the skinnier, the tinier the opening, the finer the needle. Otherwise it just sort of like crushes it rather than cuts it. Now, remember the issue we had with pitchers? The challenge is to make a pitcher that does not drip, right? Same with the teapot. Can you make a teapot that doesn't drip? Tea is a natural dye. You're pouring your tea, pouring your guests some tea, and it drips on your white linen tablecloth. You're going to have stains, because it's a natural dye. One way to get rid of that drip is to have a very sharp inner lip here, like we did on the pitcher. So sometimes I like to use a tool to get that, you know, you don't want to round this off. You also don't want to trumpet, like I would call this spout on this bottle. See how it trumpets out like the musical instrument? That will make the liquid splash out. You don't want it to splash out. You want it to pour nicely. So don't trumpet it, even though you have a tendency to do that. Right? I mean, you know, we always sort of do that with our base forms, and try not to do that. Okay, I'll throw another one though, just sometimes one is not enough. If you get a bat with some paper towel on it. Now these don't have bottoms, remember. I just make a mark. You can use your wire. Or you can just cut it with your stick. It's hollow. And we just want it, like the handle, to just set up, because we are going to blend it into the body of our teapot. So we don't want it leather hard at all. We want it malleable. So the question is that spout long enough after it's placed, because it has to be placed a certain way? You know, would it be long enough to reach the lip of that teapot? You can say, well, I'll just put it higher, but does it look well? Does it look right higher? Are you blocking the spot for the handle? So those are all the kinds of things you're going to be thinking about. So just, open it up. I'm not concerned about a floor. Yay, for once. No compression. Lots of collaring, but no compression. Also at the conference, I said there were 3 throwers, but one woman, Garrett Grimm, you should Google her. She does sculptural pieces, figures, lots of horses, horse-drawn carriages, females, males, very whimsical sculptures. Every single component is thrown on the potter's wheel. I'll have to show you, I've got pictures. Every component. So, if she was doing the thigh on a person, she would throw it. From the knee down, she would throw it. The torso, she would throw it. From the elbow up, she would throw it. From the elbow down, she would throw it. Weld it all together. unbelievable. So for some people, mastering the wheel just becomes a tool for building other things. We master the wheel with this series of functional items, you know, mugs, pitchers, bowls, jars, teapots. That's how we master the wheel. And we can become a very fine functional potter, like that woman, Kristen Kiefer, I just showed you. Or you work sculpturally, but using the wheel as a tool. There was another potter, Bede Clark. All his forms were thrown vessels, but they were not functional. Thrown vessels, teapots, bowls, but they weren't necessarily functional. Some of them are. But, you know, gigantic pitchers and teapots that purely for decoration. So again, it really helps when your clay is aged for this. If it were not aged, I would not be able to throw a spout, I can promise you that. So I sort of constricted it a little too soon without getting the clay out of here. I can only go down this far now, so I'm, you know, talking distracted, and I know there was a lot of clay in here that I could have squeezed and brought up into the neck here, which would have helped me to get a much longer neck. So you can always trim your spout. Well, we'll trim from the base. So you can always sort of make that stem shorter, but you can't make it longer if you need it when you're assembling them. Some people cut it at a slant. But the trick, just like a pitcher, is to not have it drip. Notice I'm keeping my hands really steady when I'm collaring. So as I have one finger in there, it's never good to, you know, have your fingers splayed out. If you can remember to bring your finger in, notice my elbows, they're anchored in my rib cage. Notice this thumb is anchored on my right thumb, just sort of hunkering down to keep everything steady. Zero movement in my hands except going up the neck, right? And then see, my finger keeps going out, I have to bring it back in. It's a wayward finger. Okay, so the clay's cooperating for me today. Yesterday, throwing those first 3 spouts didn't go well. But see, it's practice. So I struggled yesterday through 3 spouts. Today it's going a lot easier. So maybe one day you go, okay, I'm just going to go practice spout so that you don't stress out about it. You know, just say, I'm going to just practice. You know, you haven't thrown anything this narrow before. You know, just say, I'm going to practice throwing spouts. Get rid of the stress of, oh, I need this spout for my teapot. I mean, basically that's what I had to do yesterday, is practice it. Because I haven't thrown a spout probably since last November. And was I rusty? Yes, I was. So you can get a twist in it very easily. And it could very easily rip off, because my twist is way down here and I can't get down there anymore. So that's when you need the assistance of some kind of stick. Not sure this is the best one. So wherever your outside fingers are, you're right up against that stick on the inside. Got it out. That can happen so easily. See, it's that last pull you want to make. And you twist it. Now, it's just so thick, I can just feel it so thick. You might be wondering, why does she keep pulling? Every time you collar, it thickens up. It just feels so thick to me that I keep trying to get it out, get the clay out of there. It's no taller than that one, is it? Maybe cushion right here to make the stem a little longer. Wherever the rib is on the outside, try to have your finger on the inside. This works great for getting the finger marks off. Trim it. Oh, put some finger ridges right back in there, didn't I? Sometimes I trim at a slant to try to make this inside edge pretty sharp. And that sharp edge will cut the flow of liquid off. Now you know that edge is going to get softened by the glaze anyway, so you can make it pretty sharp now. Okay. So you can make a mark. You can cut it off completely with the stick like I did last time. Or you can come around with your wire if that feels better. Okay. So along with the handles now, you're letting them set up. So you throw the teapot and the lid, you wait till they're leather hard, then you pull the handles, throw the spouts, let them set up, then you trim your lids. Okay, the pads are here, but the lids aren't. Lids are over here. So I pulled two handles, I threw two spouts, and I threw two lids. So the teapot was tall. I felt like it needed a tall knob. So that's the other reason why you might pick one lid over another. You might not like the knob better on one. One might fit better. This one's much looser than this one. Of course, we don't know how well it fits until they're completely bone dry, both components, as you know with your jars. So this is a little looser. This has a taller knob. You might drop one on the floor. So, okay, so we did not cut the teapot off, remember. Get a sense for how much clay there is to trim away. flip it upside down to trim it. If I can do this without lugging it down with clay. All the professionals at the conference did. Otherwise you can, put a few pieces down. Make sure it's, the pulling of this tool could very easily lift that lid right out of the opening of the jar. So far it's behaving. Did this work well for you, trimming the lid in the jar? As long as you don't cut the jar off. The lids dry much faster than the jar because they're so small. And usually the top of the jar dries rapidly because all pieces dry from the top down. It's down here that usually stays wetter longer. If either component is too wet, the lid might get stuck in the jar. Did that happen to anybody? Yeah. So the trimming tool always brings a lot of grog to the surface. Just dampen it with your sponge. And run the rubber rib along it or across it, and that just makes the grog all lay down nicely. Really recessed the ledge in there because I want to do something to the ledge. So I hope I can get the lid out. If either one is too wet, you might seal it right in that. What's the other name for that ledge, Anthony?
Gallery.
Gallery. I was going balcony, reservoir.
Gallery. I've heard people call it a carousel too, since it goes all the way around, but I don't like that one.
I've never heard that. I've never called it a gallery. But they call that ledge a gallery. Kristen called it a gallery. Okay, so I'm getting a little nervous here. I'm going to put a little bit of clay down there to... I lost my nerve. Gallery, that should be easy to remember, right? So I don't particularly think a curved inset lid is too good for a teapot because I just think it could fall out more easily than the other types of lids. Like I said, I always put my finger gently on the knob as I pour. Who's not a tea drinker in here? Uh-oh. See, I've been drinking tea since, well, my entire life. My dad used to work the second shift, and is that the shift that gets off at midnight or something? And many times if I had a cold, he heard me coughing, he'd get me up, we'd sit in the darkened kitchen and drink a cup of tea at midnight, so. I've been drinking it my entire life. It's a wonderful drink. iced tea, hot tea. The Japanese throw these beautiful tea bowls in connection with the Japanese tea ceremony, so there's a whole ceremony you can read about and how important the teaware is to that culture and to Zen Buddhism. Okay, so if you cut the lid off properly, off the hump, you wouldn't have too much trimming. Actually, you can, if you really are good at cutting it off the hump, you might get away with not trimming this at all, but I sometimes, or most often, have to trim it. Okay, so I usually do not trim the teapot itself during a demo because the demo takes so long, but then I find students are reluctant to. If I don't, students don't. So I'm going to have to woman up and do it. Besides, this is one bottom-heavy teapot. Very clunky. Take a look at it. Hopefully it's going to be incredibly improved after we trim a foot. Okay. Twist it to get it off. They do sell these crimped wires that make that nice design on the bottom when you trim it. Okay, so just like a bowl, you're trimming a bowl. Get one hand on the inside, one hand on the outside, and feel around for where it starts to thicken up. Make a thumb mark where that is. Try to get a sense and remember in your mind's eye how much clay there is for you to carve away so that you don't carve too little and then have to recenter it and carve some more, or so that you don't carve too much and go right through it. Feels like my bottom is thinner than I'd like it, but I've got a lot of extra clay there. And I sort of have a bowl shape in the middle. I don't have that 90-degree angle in the corners. I deliberately, you can't see it probably, it's too dark, but I do have a bowl shape at the bottom. Again, you can help yourself by making a little circle there. Get even closer. So we have to recenter this. This is when for centering, I like this stationary, thick sgraffito needle. But for trimming, it's way too thick. So hold it stationary. Where the mark is, or where the mark is not, is where you pull it towards you. A little at a time. Hold it stationary or you'll never center it. So now the line goes from there to there. Pull it towards you where the line is not, ever so slightly, so you don't overcompensate. When the needle is running evenly all the way around the perimeter of the bowl, or the piece, or the pot, then you're good. Okay, looking around, don't see any clay. Luckily the barrels are here now. place the lugs first before you start pressing them in. And then just press it a little bit on each one so that you don't move the pot. You could move it after you've just centered it. So then you go around little at a time with each one. Then you can start pressing it a little harder each time. Once you think it's all anchored in there, but that way you won't move the pot. Okay. Bought some new trimming tools at the conference and did not bring them. That's too bad. All right, so remember, tap it in your ear. The duller thud means that there's thickness. If you do it at the beginning, you sort of get a benchmark. Then as it gets thinner and thinner, that tap should sound more hollow. It's tricky because it's a little wet down here, whereas the lip was getting really dry. And normally, if it were not a lidded jar, you flip it upside down, cover the bottom half to allow cover the top half to let the bottom half dry out a little bit, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't flip it because I didn't want to cut it off the bat. Now I actually want to put a little round foot in here. I'm not sure how much clay I have though. Anchor your elbows in your rib cage. Keep your tool steady. Already you can see how this shape has improved drastically, right? Say yes. Say it looks better. It's the difference between a good pot and a great pot. Although I don't think the other one was even good. It was really bottom heavy. Much better. So then remember the two tests. Besides tapping in your ear, you can push a little bit. A little bit, there's no movement, push a little harder, no movement, push a little harder, 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 still no movement. Then you know you have more clay to trim away. Now that doesn't work if the pot's too dry. If the pot's just right for the trimming, if it's at the right consistency for normal trimming, then that push test, may not work. If it's too wet, it might push because it's too wet. If it's too dry, it won't push at all because there's just no moisture to move. But if you're at the right consistency, the push test and then tapping in your ear, and you'll hear it get more hollow as you trim more away. Push. So I have a feeling there wasn't that much clay down here. Remember, if you put a straight edge across it, you want it deep enough to be able to glaze that inner ring. So you really can trim, you can put a foot on anything. Bowls and plates have to have feet, but you can put a foot on anything. I just don't have you doing that for mugs and pitchers, again, so that we don't develop bad habits and leave extra clay down there and never learn how to get it out of the bottom because you're depending on trimming. Okay, so I'm starting to see slight movement. Get a little bit more carved away. Straight edge across. Be able to glaze it without that inner ring touching the kiln shelf and picking up kiln wash and embedding it in there. It's nasty when it does that. I actually wanted to make this foot tall enough to be able to flute it. I'm not sure I have it tall enough. So there's, minute details that you can add to your pieces that do take them from good to great, or great to better, great to awesome. Starting to see a little movement, so I'm gonna put this puppy to rest. So again, to get rid of any of the scratch marks, tool marks, grog, run a little film of water across it, rubber rivet. And inside as well. And you want to make sure you can use that straight edge on your tool. That's not the tool you have. You have this one. The R1 and the R2. This is the R2. You have that flat edge there. Make sure that's flat. Okay. Wow. Not enough for my name in there now. Okay. Still a little heavy. A lot better, right? A lot more graceful than what it was. Okay. Cut.
Okay.
So, have your lids nearby. Have your spouts nearby. And your handles. So we have to attach a handle on the shoulder, which I'm not quite sure I left enough room there. We have to attach a spout, and remember it has to be level with the lip of the teapot. We have to make sure you have your lid on your pot when you're putting the handles on, because, yay, Emily's here right when we're attaching everything. Good. For a while I was doing these double handles. And so one day when I was doing it, probably the first one, my lid was across the room somewhere. And so I put the handles on, and I never did put the lid back on. I guess it was on a shelf. And so it wasn't until it was already bone dry, then I go to put the lid on, and I couldn't get it through the openings of the, oh, it was a flange lid, right? So the flange hangs over the lip, and it would not get through the handles. So, you know, mistakes are fine, you learn from mistakes. So of course that never happened again, but so it became just a watering can, I called it, for my plants, because I couldn't get the lid through. So make sure the lid is on there, but it also helps with proportion as well. Okay, so I've been inspired by the conference. I'm going to try to break out of my box here, and I'm going to try to flute this edge without destroying it. Maybe do a rough, lay in a rough area first, then you can go back and refine it. This is what I wanted to do to the foot as well. Not sure, I don't think I left enough clay down there, but I could go in and nick that as well. So it's also, the lip is really dry. So if this were softer, you know by now I could have been cutting this much more easily. But it's hard. And when it's this hard, you can make a lot more mistakes that way. So, knowing I wanted to do this, I recessed the ledge more than normal so that I could have a taller lip in order for me to flute. And again, if this were softer clay, this process would be going a lot more easily. So I could mimic that at the foot and make some nicks in the foot. I guess I could. I would have wanted to do that before I fluted the lip so I could do it upside down. Even if I had the slightest bit, it would be better than nothing. Much softer clay would have been a lot easier. It's just this attention to detail that moves your piece out of mediocrity and into a greater realm. So, having a clunky base like this was before, trimming a foot makes it so much more graceful. Having a straight lip or perhaps fluting the lip. So I can go back and refine this after, but just know that, you know, it's tricky when you cannot, like we said before, when you can't cut the piece off the bat, there's no way to make that dry faster down there. Meanwhile, the top is drying too much. Okay. So I think I can go back and refine that after. Refine those flutes. Probably going to do a little bit of dotting. See, we're inspired. Even we can be inspired when you go to conferences. So see that how she was fluting her rim, and she flutes the foot. So, trying to be a good person. Okay, so I do have a bucket of spouts over here for you to sort of play around with. Get a sense of, you know, what height is your handle going to be? What height is your spout going to be? We are going to trim the spout as promised. So the lip, again, the lip of the spout should be equal to or higher than the lip of the teapot. But remember, I need room to attach a handle as well. You could attach it way down here, but then the spout would have to go, you know, it's too low, the spout's too low, so I mean you could tilt it. Now, my ledge, or the gallery, is really recessed, right? So actually, I would not fill this with water beyond this point. So I don't really have to go on this particular teapot. My spout does not have to go all the way to the lip because my ledge is way down here. So there's no way you're going to pour water beyond that ledge. I mean, that's just, you don't do that. So actually now for this one, so if you see in books that the spout does not go up all the way to the lip, perhaps that's the case. So here's where my ledge is. So I could essentially put the spout there, which would leave me plenty of room to attach the handle. But you do have to design it, design it whether it's going to be a side handle or a top handle. If it's top, you have to leave room, accommodate. I think this could have been a little flatter up here to accommodate the handle. Again, getting really dry, and we have to attach a spout and handle, so a little spritz on there. So, you know, I can determine which knob I like better. The stem of that knob isn't thrown very well, but I like the height of it better than this one. And those throwing rings that I deliberately left there are now distracting me, but I'm not real fond of that stem. So anyway, you can make your decisions. If I had a third one, it would be even better, right? So it's a little too far out. Okay, so we're placing. Also, if you have more than one handle, you can use one just to fool around with. And then once you figure out, you know, how it's going to go, then you can use your other one as the one that you're going to attach. So if this goes here and my spout goes here, remember, I can have the tip of the spout a little lower on this because I have such a deep recessed ledge. So perhaps something like that. lid's not in place. Okay. So what you can do, again, if you just have a handle to play with, right? You have your parts to play with. You can sort of make a mark as to where you're going to slip and score for the handle. And then again, if I have a lid on here with a tall knob, can I lift it up and out, right? Learn from my mistakes. Okay. Spouts. This is really wet. So you're going to cut it with your, oh, do you have an X-Acto knife? No. You can cut it with your needle too. So you're going to slowly peck away at it, molding it to the body of your pot. Just slightly wetter than a little wet. You can also, I've also laid it down. This way I can really trim it symmetrically. But this is a little wetter than you would want it to be. Yeah, but you get a sense, you know, you're going to be blending it into the body of your teapot, so you do want it soft. You trim away a little bit at a time, keeping in mind where that ledge is. So the ledge again is there, the bottom of my spout is about right where it should be then. But then you've got to look at it, you know, is that spout too heavy? It's a little, look at it from the silhouette, squint. It's a little heavy. I think I want to trim a little bit more away. Is this one better? I still didn't get it as narrow as I wanted to. So you see how thin they are. Very thin. Okay. Now that's much higher than it needs to be, but that's fine. It can always be higher. What do you think of that? Too much? Should I trim more away? Gotta squint. Oops. Or you drop it, see? This is why you have extra ones. Telling you. I think the ones I drew the other day are too dry. Let's see. I'm looking for a little narrower. This is a little narrower.
Okay, we're going handheld here.
We're going what? Out of the picture?
You're like way out of the picture for
See?
a lot of
This
stuff.
is a nice spout here. Or you might fall into your teapot and the whole thing might go off. There's, oops. Sorry. drop the whole thing. Definitely try not to do that. But it's always good to have extra parts. You saw how I just dropped that one. So you can see how getting through one entire teapot is going to make your second one a heck of a lot better, because you're going to know what you're doing. But it's all about proportion. You know, sometimes these look like little elephants, and when you don't trim enough away at the base of this spout, it gets really heavy. So you have to squint your eyes and look. All right, one more trim, and we will get this attached. How about that? This one's a little wet. Okay. We're good. Make sure that your handle is right across the top, half of the pot, and then you proportion the spout as well. Check it again. Where is the ledge? So if you have a flanged lid, the water could go pretty high up because you don't have a ledge for a flanged lid. Okay, so that's way beyond. That's good. When you think you've got it, ooh, I don't know, we'll see. Okay, then just like you traced where the handle would be attached, trace around with your needle. Trace around the spout, because we have to do something. What do we have to do? Make holes. Yeah. Okay. Try not to drop that now. This here. Now, I do have a hole maker, but you don't need it. Or it may be when we made test tiles. Yeah, I had to put it somewhere else. You could use your needle. You could use an X-Acto knife. Actually, I think I'll slip it first. If you slip it first, you'll know where to not put holes. So if you use loose tea, and if you're a tea drinker, you know, most people are familiar with tea that comes in bags, right? But real tea drinkers drink loose tea. And if you put loose tea inside the teapot, a lot of times all those little tea leaves can catch if you do keep the inside of the holes really rough. So if you made your holes instead of with a clean hole maker, and you just sort of took an X-Acto knife, twisted it, or you could use your needle as well to make the holes. Yeah, it doesn't work as well, not as easily. But many little holes are much better than like one big hole. But don't make the holes too small, because what's going to happen to the holes? They're going to shrink. Then what else is going to happen?
Clogged. Clogged.
How would it clog?
Glaze or the tea.
Glaze. We are going to actually be glazing the inside of those holes, because the way we glaze, you know how the rule is always the inside first? We're going to pour glaze inside the teapot, swish it around, and then pour it out of the spout so that it glazes the inside of the spout, and so it's going to glaze the inside of those holes. And if the holes are too small, and then it's going to shrink 11%, a lot of times students have their holes completely seal up. Also when we glaze, I'll show you how to do it, we'll probably be spraying these. After you pour the glaze out the spout, you're going to blow really hard through the spout to break any bubbles or films that may go across the spout. So make these, if you take an X-Acto knife, we'll have to put some out for everybody to use in our cooled tool bin over there. I think if you just twist an X-Acto knife, this is the perfect size, which would accommodate both shrinkage and the glazing process. Right? So you don't really need one of those hole makers, but just to show you how they work. It's right inside here. To unclog them with your needle anyway, so. Well, you know how these work, because this is how we made the test tiles. But the other way, as I was saying before, when you're just twisting the X-Acto knife around, sort of leaves a bunch of clay on the inside of the hole, and it almost creates like a little sieve and catches all those little tea leaves as you're pouring out the tea, if you're using loose tea. But sometimes people put loose tea in a little silver ball and throw it in there as well. Okay, so make sure they're big enough. I sort of cut my scoring short, didn't I? Saw the company that makes this scoring tool that Carly found in town. Saw the company that makes them. Love that tool. Okay, so is this the spout I'm using? I think so. I like to bevel that edge to get it as thin as possible. Because I'm going to blend it. Okay, so we're going to take this off for now. Maybe just get that area slipped and scored. Softening up a little bit since it's a little dry up here. Double check it again with your ledge. Good. All right, then start pressing it in. And because it's as soft as a pulled handle, you're able to start blending it into the pot. Now you can see that I deliberately left that seam on some of these. It was just something I started doing and I deliberately left that seam and, actually I was doing it a lot, wasn't I? I was taking a dowel rod and I was just sort of rolling it on there, and I remember I almost got rejected from a show. A juror thought it was sloppy craftsmanship and he's like, I almost rejected you because of that seam. Like, well, obviously it was intentional. He didn't like it.
Yeah, I didn't see your
So, obviously you have to put some work into making it disappear, just like you would. We had to pay special attention to our mug joints. Well, the handles on the mugs, the handles on the pitchers. You want to make it disappear. You don't want somebody to look at your piece and go, oh, that's where you attached it. Blend it in. So this is the spout I threw yesterday, isn't it? I mean, I threw it and I literally immediately put it under plastic because you want it to be, you do not want it to be dry. Okay. The handle, I too sometimes you can dry it in that curve. Is this the one? This is the one we've been playing around with. We want to bevel the joint too. I'll just practice on this handle. See what I mean? You want to bevel it inwards to follow the contour of the pot. I'm going to curve it out a little bit at the bottom, so instead of like straight up, I'm going to curve it out a little to accommodate the lip, right? So, you know, it is good to have a handle just to play around with. So this is my play around handle. Okay? Oh, make sure you're right across the diameter. It's going to look really dumb if it's not. And I am going to clean that up and refine it.
Can we
Remember-
pause for a second?
Yes.
Is it overheating? Is it the temperature?
It
That's
was
good.
overheating for
That's
a
good.
while. We good?
It was overheating?
No, our previous demos.
No, it was a battery light. Now
Okay.
I have full battery. So. Thank you.
Okay, so you see how we beveled it in to follow the curve of the body. Okay, so this is my practice one. I haven't forgotten Megan's question. Do you have a metal rib? See, I try to minimize what you have to buy, but I've got plenty of stuff for you to borrow. Nothing wants to break free today. Everything is just sticking. Is the other one taller?
Mm-hmm. I think it
I
is.
feel like I want it to be taller now that I've abused and used this one. We might have to use it. I didn't abuse it too much. Ooh, sort of, but. They're about the same. They're the same. Looked taller though, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Might just be the curvature. The other one like peaked more.
Yeah. So you only make that mistake once. Mistakes are good. Albert Einstein said, if I have 10,000 failures, it just tells me 10,000 things that don't work. They're not really failures, it's just 10,000 things that may not work for your particular task at hand, but you may discover something else in the meantime. All right, so I slipped and scored both pot and handle. Make sure you look at it from all angles that you are right across the diameter of that teapot. It's gonna look really silly if it's off to one side. From one side, the other side, lid up, out. Again, if you have a large flange, it's got to come up, 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 out, okay? Something else Kristen did was because she did a lot of impressing. You know how impressing has to be done at the plastic stage, but yet for throwers, not quite when you're right done throwing, because it gets so sticky that it's hard to impress a clean design. But when she's pushing, when she's pressing on the outside and pushing counter pressure on the inside, she dips her fingers in cornstarch so that her fingers don't stick to the inside wall, thus marring her marks. So potters have lots of tricks up their sleeve. So the handle's sagging a little bit, but as it starts to set up, I'll be able to probably prop it up a little bit more. And how are we doing on time? Then I have to go back once everything's in place and refine all these joints. The handle joints, the spout joint, and make them disappear. Meanwhile, with the lid in place, right? And I think I'm going to do some slip trailing. Okay, it worked a little bit ago. Logged. Worked this morning at 8 o'clock. This is too big. I'm probably going to do some dot work. Probably down here. I might trace the curve later on. I'm probably going to put some dots on the lid. And sometimes they get pointy when they set up a little bit. You want to get rid of that point. You don't really want them to be pointy for later on. Just knock it down a little bit later on. But first I have to refine this lip. I've got to refine these joints. Sometimes I'll take a very soft coil. See if there's a soft one in here. Ooh. You know, see, even I'm forgetting. There is a piece under here, okay? Not a good place for it, but it's the only place she has. So as this, we have to really be careful. I'm encroaching upon the edge myself here. We have to be really cognizant of the fact that there is a piece under there. Okay, so for the base of my handles, sometimes I like to roll out a real soft coil to fill in the blanks. No, I don't really have a lot of room in that one. Try this one. Scooch it down in there. And I just like to go around the seam to build that up a little bit. and make that transition a little nicer. See, so you have to leave yourself some room to do this handle attaching. Crooked. So it's pretty rough right now. You just got to go in and clean it all up. Okay. Questions? So if there's some way that you could maybe throw the pot and lid before the break, wrap it really carefully under plastic, lots of plastic. Then when you come back, pull the handles, throw some spouts, and then put it together. So the syllabus says Tuesday. We won't have it Tuesday. That's a little soon with the holiday, isn't it? So next Thursday then. So what's today? Tuesday. Does that sound like a plan? A little enthusiasm, please. Yes, I'd love to do that. It's all about timing. So again, I'm gonna like be sort of propping this up. As Megan said, it looks like a flower, and the stem on the lid is the stamen. And so I feel like the handle, which is a little crooked from this view, not too good. We're gonna have a lot of fixing here. I just feel like the handle should go up a bit. Wow, not so good here. All right, so it's a challenge. They're fun. Fusing pot, lid, handle, spout, everything you've learned all semester. And it's amazing that in a few short couple months, you're up to this point of making a teapot. They're not easy. And look how far you've come. Okay, cut. We're good. You wanna